Hey, everybody. That was loud. I like it. Thanks. Um, so, grab a Bible, turn to Hebrews chapter 11. As usual, we are going to start in Hebrews 11, and then we're going to jump back and spend some time in Genesis, because Hebrews 11 is a treasure of references to the giants of the faith from the early days of Israel's history. And so that's all found in Genesis. And after spending 3 weeks just looking at Abraham, this morning we are going to run through three other people in the Hall of Faith. And in order to do that, we're going to have to hit the ground running. So would you look with me at Hebrews chapter 11, starting in verse 20. It says, "By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regards to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. And by faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instruction about his bones." And that's it. That's all it says. After spending 3 paragraphs talking about Abraham, the writer of Hebrews just sprints right past all the other patriarchs. And we may be tempted to sprint right past them too, but we really shouldn't do that, because there's a lot of very good stuff in those 3 stories he's referencing. Now, to be fair, the writer of Hebrews doesn't have to go into great detail because he's writing to a bunch of Jewish Christians, and they all know these stories very, very well. But we're not a bunch of Jewish Christians. We're not living in the first century. We're probably maybe not as familiar as they would have been. They would have talked about these stories multiple times a year. But we probably touch on them every few years. So I want to take some time to look at each of these stories. So if you wouldn't mind, flip back to Genesis chapter 27. And the reason we're going to take a little bit of time to look at all these is because if we don't know the stories that he's referencing, we could miss something really vital as we live by faith. It's something that is essential to who we are and how we live. Now, what we've already seen, what's already happened, last week we looked at how Isaac, his faith was tested, right? Along with Abraham. Abraham had taken Isaac up onto the mountain to sacrifice him, and so that was very much a test of Isaac's faith as well. Well, now we have to fast forward to the end of Isaac's life. He has sons of his own. He has 2 boys, and he's at the end of his life, and he is about to bless Jacob and Esau. So starting in verse 1, it says, "When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, 'My son.' 'Here I am,' he answered. And Isaac said, 'I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your weapon, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat, so I may give you my blessing before I die.' Now, Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau." So Rebekah is eavesdropping. Rebekah is Isaac's wife, and she hatches a plan. Her plan is to go get Jacob, her other son, the Esau's slightly younger twin brother, to go and he says, "Go get some goats and bring them to me, and I'm going to make some goat meat stew or some food for your father. You go disguise yourself as your brother." So Jacob goes out and he puts on Esau's clothes, and then actually Rebekah takes some goat skin and puts it on his neck, the back of his neck here, and puts it on his hands, because Esau was a hairy man and Jacob wasn't, and they were concerned that maybe Jacob or Isaac would know what was going on. That somehow works. That makes no sense to me at all, and yet somehow it works. Look at verse 18. It says, "He, Jacob, went to his father and said, 'My father.' 'Yes, my son,' he answered. 'Who is it?' I think that's a really silly question. He says, 'Yes, my son. Who is it?' But when you realize what's going on, he's hearing Jacob's voice, right? And he doesn't know why Jacob's there. So he says, 'Yes, my son, who is it?' And Jacob said to his father, 'I am Esau, your firstborn, and I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of the game so that you may give me your blessing.' And Isaac asked his son, 'How did you find it so quickly, my son?'" See, he's a little suspicious, right? He says, "The Lord your God gave me success," he replied. And then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near so I can touch you, my son, and know that you really are my son Esau or not." And Jacob went close to his father, Isaac, who touched him and said, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. So somehow that crazy goatskin thing worked. Skip down to verse 26. It says, "Then his father Isaac said to him, 'Come here, my son, and kiss me.' So he went to him and kissed him. And when Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of heaven's dew and of earth's riches, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. May be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and may those who bless you be blessed." So he blesses the wrong son. It says, verse 30, after Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. This whole thing reads like a soap opera, doesn't it? I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous. So Esau learns very quickly what Jacob has done. He's like, "Where'd you bring the game from? I don't know. Who are you? I'm Esau. Who did I just bless?" This whole thing, right? And he is very upset. Esau is just crushed because the blessing is a big deal. And Isaac is also very upset, but there's not very much he can do. I mean, a blessing was sacred, and once spoken, it was spoken. And so he's kind of stuck. He doesn't have anything to offer him. See, a blessing isn't just kind words that a father would say over a son. It wasn't just a prediction about what the future could be like. It was actually, in a very real sense, an invocation of God to do everything that you were saying about your child. Now, I don't want to get into all the theology of it. Did God inspire the blessing, or was God somehow beholden to what the father said? But I do want to point out that in the Bible, very often, whatever is said as a blessing comes about. God brings about those things. And so, to the ancient people, this is a sacred moment. And once a blessing is spoken, it can't be revoked. It is a true moment of divine intervention. And that's kind of crazy because now Isaac is stuck. So look at verse 38. Where am I? Verse 38. Esau said to his father, "Do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father." You can hear the desperation in his voice, right? It says, Esau wept aloud. His father Isaac answered him, "Your dwelling will be away from earth's riches, away from the dew of heaven. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck." And that's all that really Isaac could say to Esau. This is a tragic story of a family divided. This is a father who favors one son and a mother who favors another, even to the point of crafting a deception so they can fool the father into giving the blessing to to Jacob. And Jacob had already stolen the birthright, so he already had the inheritance. And they just go one step further. This is a horrible, horrible story. And yet, this is the interesting thing. The writer of Hebrews doesn't mention any of that. He doesn't draw our attention to all the drama that goes on around this whole blessing. What does he talk about? He focuses on not the brokenness of their relationship, but the faith of Isaac in giving a blessing anyway, giving a blessing to either son. Why? Well, it's because Isaac believed that it was his responsibility to pass his relationship with God on to his sons. He knew that he had to lay a foundation. God had promised blessing to Abraham, his father, and then he reconfirmed it with Isaac, the son, himself. And so Isaac wanted that blessing to be passed on to his sons so that God's promises to Abraham could be fulfilled and would be fulfilled. He wanted them looking forward to what God had promised for them. He was doing something very, very important. He passed his faith on with the blessing. Now, in verse 20, it says that Jacob is speaking to Isaac, and he says, Yahweh, your God, right? And it kind of sounds like Jacob is distancing himself from God. But that's actually not the case, because this is actually normal for how we see Jacob talking about God. In fact, in Genesis 31, he says, the God of my father has been with me. That's how he always refers to God, as the God of my father. In 32, he says, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Yahweh. So he is speaking to the God. He knows that God is there and real, but he refers to him as the God of the Father. Now, that's an interesting idea. See, Isaac had passed his faith on to his sons, despite the fact that Isaac had been a father that was a father over a divided family, a father that showed too much favor to one son and not enough to the other. For all of his faults or flaws, he had passed his foundation of faith on to his sons. And what's really interesting is for all of his faults and flaws, Jacob did as well. He managed to pass his faith on to his sons. Flip over to Genesis chapter 48. We'll look at that second piece of what the Hebrews writer references in that second verse. Starting at verse 1, it says this. Sometime later, Joseph was told, okay, so who's Joseph? He's the son of Jacob. He's one of the last sons of Jacob, right? Sometime later, Joseph was told, your father is ill. So he took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, along with him. And when Jacob was told, your son Joseph has come to you, Israel rallied his strength and sat up in bed. Now remember, God changed Jacob's name to Israel. So it's interesting right there, we see Jacob, and then all of a sudden, when we're going to come to a blessing moment, we get referenced as Israel now. Does that make sense? You with me? Not if you with me. Holla if you hear me. Anybody? Okay, good. All right. So look at verse 8. It says, when Israel saw the sons of Joseph, he asked him, who are these? They are the sons God has given me here in Egypt. And Joseph said to his father, then Israel said, bring them to me that I may bless them. Look at verse 13. And Joseph took them. Now this is you kind of have to imagine this in your head. Joseph took them, the two sons, Ephraim on his right toward Israel's left, and Manasseh on his left toward Israel's right hand. He brought them close to him. But Israel reached out his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head, though he was younger, and crossed his arms and put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn. And then he blessed Joseph and said, may the God whom my father Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless these boys. Okay, so this is kind of a unique, interesting moment. Can you see the picture, right? You're supposed to put your right hand on the one that gets the best blessing and your other hand on the other, but he's done this. And he begins to bless him. And something very kind of interesting happened. Look at verse 17. It says, when Joseph saw his father place his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased. So he took hold of his father's hand to move it to Ephraim's head, but from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to him, no, father, this is the firstborn. You can sort of see an adult child talking to their very old parent. You know, it's almost patronizing in a way. Hey, if you're an adult child with some aging parents, be kind to them, please. They can tell. And it's interesting because he says, I know, my son, I know. He too will be a people, and he will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will be like a group of nations. He blessed them that day and said, in your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. So right there, in that moment, Ephraim and Manasseh switch places in birth order, and more importantly, they get adopted by by Jacob. Does that make sense? They get adopted into sonship. They're not just grandkids. Now they're part of all the 12 tribes of Israel. And they get this massive blessing that goes with it. And here's what's cool about that. This is very much a picture of our adoption by God and our blessing by him. He takes children that are not his own, and he calls them and reconciles them, and he says, now you are my sons and daughters, and now I will bless you. This is a picture of our future. And so we have an obligation to fulfill exactly what Jacob says here. We have an obligation to say to other people, may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. May God adopt you as well. As adopted children, we have a responsibility to make sure that other people know that they can be adopted too. Do you see that? Okay, so the writer of Hebrews is referencing this amazing moment of Joseph's faith that God would eventually call descendants to him, and he would say, I'm going to bring you in, and I'm going to give you the blessing that I gave to your great-grandfather Abraham. You with me? He's trying to pass on his faith. And in fact, we know something very interesting. God had promised Abraham that their people would be in Israel, what we call Israel now, the promised land. Canaan at the time is what it was called. He said that they would take all that land, and everything he sees, all of it would belong to them. And Jacob knew that. Jacob understood that. Well, how would he know that? Well, he got it from his father Isaac, right? Where did Isaac get it from? His father Abraham. And the writer of Hebrews is referencing Joseph's faith that God would eventually call his descendants out of Egypt and on to the promised land that he had promised to their grandfather before that. Look at chapter 50. I'm in the wrong place here, sorry. Look at chapter 50, starting in verse 24. It says this, "Then Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am about to die.'" So now we have the younger about to die, right? "I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath and say, "God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones from this place." He didn't want to have his body left behind in Egypt. He wanted to see the promises of God fulfilled, and he referenced this. Okay, so what's interesting is right then, Joseph dies. I mean, within days, we don't have exactly the timeline, but he dies, and he's 110 years old. And if you don't remember anything about Joseph, he's the second most important guy in all of Egypt. He is running the show. And right now, the Israelites are thriving. So why in the world would he tell them that, hey, God's going to take you to another place that he promised? Why is he looking forward to that? No one but God would have known that in a generation they were about to be enslaved. Except that God had already told Abraham that back in Genesis chapter 15, right? So how in the world would Joseph know? Jacob told him. How would Jacob know? Isaac told him. How would Isaac know? Abraham told him. And we have here is a perfect example of faith being passed on. In Hebrews 11, it mentions that Jacob, when he was back in the land that would become Israel, it said he worshiped while leaning on his staff. Most scholars agree that that means that he was ready to travel. He knew that the promise hadn't been fulfilled yet. He knew that they were going to leave and come back. God had promises, and he was trying to convey to his sons and all those who would come after him, there is a plan. God has a relationship for you. He wants you in his family. He wants to adopt you and bring you in. And he wanted to lay a foundation for all those who would come after him, that God is going to be faithful to his promise, and he is going to bring about good things in their life. What we have here is the reality that we have a responsibility to pass our faith down to the next generation. We have in these three men an example of even if they screw up, even if they're the worst parents, even if they made all kinds of huge mistakes, and man, read the story of Jacob's life. What a mess that is. But he managed to do the most important thing. He managed to remain faithful to God and pass that faith on to the next generation. And for us to live by faith, that's what it means. It means that we don't just have our faith and keep our faith to ourselves. So, you may have heard the saying that the church is one generation away from extinction. Have you ever heard that? Now, theologically, we know that's not true, right? We understand that Jesus established a kingdom and he will sustain it, it will endure, it is an eternal kingdom. But the sentiment behind that idea that the church is one generation away from extinction, it actually makes sense about this place. Not that this place is unique and the church will die here, but this place where we are. It is one generation away from losing the faith. Because what's going to happen to all of us? Sooner or later, we're not going to be here anymore, right? One way or another, we're not all going to live here for forever. And if we don't do our part to make sure that there is faith here in this place, there will be faith elsewhere. There will be a kingdom elsewhere. It will be eternal and last forever. But what about here? What about this generation that comes behind us? The church will survive, but not here. And if you think I'm wrong, take a look at Europe. Take a look at Canada. Take a look at the places where the church used to thrive, and now it's not. And even if we ignore the consequences of what will happen to the church as a body, the body of believers in this place, if we neglect our responsibility to pass our faith on to the next generation, think about the people of that generation. We will be, through neglect, condemning them to an eternity separated from God. That's why this is so important. We have a responsibility to pass our faith on to the next generation for their sake. Every person that you see needs to know that in Jesus Christ there is redemption and hope and a future. Every person you meet needs to know that deep in the deepest part of their heart and soul. It has to be real to them. And we have a responsibility to let them know. Romans 10 says, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But then Paul goes on to say, how then can they call on the one that they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one on whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? We have a responsibility, if we are living by faith, to make sure that that faith doesn't end with us. And it's more than just telling people the truth about Jesus. I mean, you can stand to be a street preacher. Yeah, I know that God sometimes calls people to do that. I think a whole lot fewer people are called to that than people that do it. You know what I mean? I find some of those internet preachers kind of obnoxious. Anybody else? Yeah, and here I am online. I'm getting ready to post this online. I'm an internet preacher. I find some of those guys who go out in the squares and they wear, the placards and they yell at people. I don't know that that's the right way to go about it. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not as effective as they think it is. But I do think that there's more to passing your faith on to the next generation than just saying, hey, you need Jesus, you're a sinner and you need Jesus. Who's going to hear that? What you have to do is mold someone's faith. You have to actively form their faith. You have to form the faith of the next generation. It's foolish to think that they're just going to get everything that we have just because we do it around them. You know what I mean? Just because we live by faith around them, that they're just going to pick it up by osmosis. That's not real. You have to actively, intentionally craft and mold the faith of the next generation. You have to, because they're not going to pick it up just by watching us. And listen, here's the heart of the matter. Here's the heart of the matter. We want your grandchildren to kneel with you before God in eternity. That's huge. Can you imagine that? To stand with your whole family before the Lord God Almighty and to lift Him up. So how do we cultivate our faith in someone else? How do we take what we know to be true and form it into them? Well, there's three things I want to say about it. The most obvious way is by supporting children ministry, like we have here at Promise Point. Support the children's ministry we have here. Listen to me. As much as we value parents being able to come and get as much as they can out of the worship and the word and the prayer that's offered in this room, you have to hear me. What's going on next door in our Family Connections building is not childcare. We are not just providing an outlet so the kids can be watched while the parents get something out of church. What's going on next door right now is spiritual formation. Those people next door right now as we speak are laying a foundation of faith, of love, of hope, and of purpose for our children that God will build on for the rest of their lives. What's going on right now next door is of greater importance maybe than what I'm doing right now, because they are hearing it for the first time. And the foundation that's laid for them better be a good one, because the world is actively trying to destroy everything that they lay down. So we need to support what they're doing. We need to support it directly. You can get involved in the children ministry next door. You absolutely can. Now some of you are thinking, no, I can't. No, not me. And let me tell you, I'm one of those guys. I've tried it. I've discovered that maybe children ministry is not for me, that I'm not so great at it. I'm much better with teenagers. I hope I'm better with adults, but children, I don't get them. But you don't know until you try. I didn't know that it wasn't my calling until I tried. And listen, you may not have any skills in this area in volunteering in children ministry. We can teach you skills. But as we've been talking about for the last several weeks, maybe you just need to step out of your comfort zone into something that God is calling you to and actively get involved in forming the faith of the next generation. If that's not for you, short of that, you certainly need to be supporting those who are next door doing children ministry. Do you know in churches around the country, most people who do children ministry feel like they're doing it in isolation. No one ever talks to them about what they're doing and why and how it's going. And they sort of feel like, well, I just show up and the parents drop their kids off and their parents pick their kids up and I don't know if I'm making an impact at all and I don't know how it's going. Everybody's got something to criticize about how it's going, but nobody ever tells us what's going great because they don't know what's going great because they don't ever talk to me. You guys should be absolutely supporting those people who do the children ministry active work. And you gotta rally around them and cheer them on and pray for them and encourage them and honestly find out what they're doing so that you can support them. The third way you can support them is absolutely financially. We need the financial support for children ministry. If we want to reach a generation, we got to pour resources into it. That's just the reality of it. Our teachers need to have the best resources to teach. And more than that, we want to finish out the floor. The guys just did an amazing job putting up walls. Thank you, team of people who did that. And it looks so great in there. But we want to finish it out. We want to have the floors done. We want to have great stuff on the walls. We want to have a great playground so the kids can play. And all of that takes money. And so you can put money into that. And here's the reason why we care about the environment, the room. When a parent brings a child to church and trusts us with their child, if they look around and there's bugs on the floor, if they look around and the ceiling's caving in, if they look around and it's like, what is the warehouse here? They may not feel so comfortable, like we care about their kids. We convey how important the children are to us by the environment we create, not just for them, but for their teachers as well. So you can really support the children ministry in that way. But I don't want you to think that children ministry is the only way to do this. In fact, I want you to understand that what our children ministry is all about. It is about partnering with parents in the spiritual development of those parents' children. We are there to support the parents. And so if you are a parent who has children at home, this is for you. You need to actively be building faith in your children. And I don't mean just sort of living it out in front of them and bringing them to church. Hey, I'm so glad that you bring your kids to church. Keep bringing your kids to be a part of this kingdom thing. We love them and we want them to be here. But if you're not doing those same things at home and more than that at home, they're not going to get it here. What we do here is to support what you are doing at home. And so you have a responsibility, whether you're a parent or a grandparent who has influence on your kids, or you're an uncle or an aunt, when you're doing your parenting or grandparenting or your uncling or aunting or whatever you're doing, you need to be actively, intentionally building faith in the people. Everything that you do with those next generation kids and teenagers has to be on this wavelength of how am I crafting in them a faith that I have. So here's some things you got to do. Make the faith practices, the things that are normal for the church, normal in your home. Pray over your kids and pray with them. Worship with your children out loud and often. Read the Bible with them and talk about it. When you discipline, be sure you tie the discipline back to God's standard for our lives. Not just behavior modification, but why does their behavior matter? You need to teach forgiveness, and you need to model it. You need to teach repentance, and you need to model it. Don't miss opportunities to get together with the church. I say this a lot, and I hope you're not offended, but I know a lot of people who have said, I don't want to force my kid to go to church because I want it to be their choice. You force your kid to brush your teeth or brush their teeth. Why don't you force them to go to church? You can't just force them to go to church. You have to build in the stuff at home, but this stuff together with all of us is of such great value, because our children ministry, and hopefully all of us, are supporting you in it. So here's the third thing that we can do, is exactly that. We have to support the people who are doing the work at home. So listen, if you're a grandparent, you may not have as much influence. You do not have as much influence as a parent. You just don't. But that doesn't mean you can't be forming the faith of the next generation. Now, you have to be careful. You have to be smart about it. And a whole lot of grandparents, can we just own the reality that sometimes grandparents look at their grandkids and think, what is wrong with you? No, your grandkids are perfect angels, right? Sometimes you look at their behavior and their choices and you wonder, what is going on? I don't understand it. And you will have that impulse to parent again. You're not a parent in that moment. You're a grandparent. Now, you can set standards, but you have to do a whole lot more love than just standards. Because if all they ever get from you is correction, they don't understand why you're correcting, you haven't earned the right to be heard. So you need to support what the parents are doing by backing up their faith formation at your house too. Some grandparents, can we just be honest, some grandparents are busy undermining the work that parents are doing. Hey, I know you're not supposed to have sweets, but here. What are you doing? Grandparents, you have a responsibility to form a foundation of faith in your grandkids. But more than that, We, all of us who do not have children at home, we have a responsibility to support all of these parents who do have children at home. We have to support them because most of you have had kids and you know how challenging it is. And many of you have tried to form faith in your kids' lives as well, and you know the difficulty there because you know the enemy is at work and he is undermining everything that you do, right? So you know the challenge that they are facing. And you need to be coming alongside them and encouraging them and building them up, not judging their choices, but helping them know how they can be strong in this. You need to sit with them and listen and let them just rant and complain about all the stuff. That way they don't take it out on their kids with me. Yeah? You need to give yourself to these other parents who are busy doing the faith formation because they need your support. We, as a church, must rally around the parents who are busy passing their faith on to the next generation. Yeah? And let me say one more thing about that. You don't stop being a parent even when your kids move out of the house, right? You have a responsibility to parent to your kids. Now, here's the tricky part. You don't get to parent them like when they lived in your house. You know that, right? You know you have to be more careful. They have taken on a life of their own. They've made their own decisions. They don't want to be just like you. And sometimes that's very, very difficult. One of the hardest things for parents to do, whether you have kids at home and they become teenagers and start to move out of the house, or whether you've got 30-year-old or 40-year-old kids and they're raising their own kids, one of the hardest things to do is to let them take responsibility for their lives. Because we still keep trying to do what's best, because after all, we know what's best, right? I was up in Lawton this week, and I was hanging out with some friends, and one of my former students was there as well, and she's a college student now, and I caught myself trying to treat her like she was 16 still. She's an adult person. She doesn't need that from me. What she needs from me is to know that I love her, and that way I have earned the right to speak to her when she comes with the questions of life. That I model for her faith that loves people well enough that they want to know what's going on in you. Are you with me? This is difficult stuff. And we have a responsibility to pass our faith on to the next generation. And let me say this, the next generation doesn't have to be a child. The next generation can be anybody younger than you, right? So what that means is Gen Z, you have a responsibility to pass it on to Gen Alpha. Millennials, you have to pass it on to Gen Z and Alpha. Gen X, you have to pass it on. You have to form faith in millennials and Gen Z and Alpha. And baby boomers, you got to take care of all of us. We need you. We need you. You have wisdom that we don't have. You must remember that we never retire from Christian ministry. We never outlive our responsibility to pass our faith on to someone else. That's what living by faith is. None of us got our faith on our own. Someone passed their faith on to you. Now, maybe they did a good job, maybe they did a bad job, but you didn't just suddenly, all of a sudden, discover faith in Christ that was fully formed, did you? We all have to do our part. The next generation needs us to. So my question to you is this: will you bless the next generation? Will you say to them, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh? Will God adopt you and bless you? Will you pray with me? God, it is easy for me to talk about, and of course it's something that I passionately care about, giving my life to the next generation for most of my adult life. So of course it's very close to home for me. For some of us, we are tired. Oh my gosh, we're tired. We poured our lives into our children, and now we're just sort of like, a break. I need a break. And some of us, God, are wrestling with the reality that we did our part and it didn't stick, and we wonder what went wrong. And God, help us to remember that you are the one who is responsible for the outcomes. But we have also a responsibility to continue to look for ways to pass our faith on. And most of us would love all of our sons and daughters and our grandkids to kneel with you in heaven, or kneel to you with us. But there's someone out there who is looking at their son or daughter and praying that someone would step in because they've done all they can and the child's not listening anymore. Someone is looking to you for the sake of someone sitting next to us. I pray, God, that we would be a church that pours ourselves into faith formation of those who come after us, that we look for ways to bless them with the truth, with hope, with promise, and most importantly, with grace, that they would know you and they would understand and receive grace. God, fill our hearts with a love for those who don't yet know you. In Jesus' name, amen.